Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate this wonderful turnout. So again, to introduce myself, my name is Carol Roberts. I graduated medical school 150 years ago. And then I did a surgical residency for ear, nose, and throat. After 10 years of operating on little kids and tonsils and ears and people's sinuses and people's thyroids, I realized that there were deeper things that I was missing, that I hadn't been taught many things in medical school, and that really what was needed was a way to look at the underlying causes of chronic illness. So I've been doing that now for 30 years, and I've learned a lot, and I've learned that there's still far more to learn. So it came to me as a great gift that this plant has now become legitimatized as a medicine. So the plant, of course, is marijuana, and we're going to be talking about that today. All right, so for all of us, let's just go through the basics, the history and the uses, and why does it work, and how wonderful is it, and is it going to help you in particular? Okay, so we'll talk about what the federal government is saying first, and then we'll go into the Florida law, what conditions are actually proven to be good for this, the different strains and the different species of the plant, some of the active ingredients, if you will, and why it works, and how can I use it, what are the different forms, and what are the risks, and then what do I have to do to sign up. So as far as federal law, marijuana has absolutely no medicinal use whatsoever. And that has meant for the last 80 years that we in this country have been unable to even study it or research it as a medicine. The federal law is still in place. And this is what's making this whole transition so interesting and so fraught, if you will. Because on the federal level, it's a crime to use or possess marijuana. It has no medicinal use. It's a Schedule I along with LSD and heroin. So most of us in this room, I suspect, know better. And we're just waiting for the government to catch up. And so I would, exhort you to write to your congressman, contact them, call them, tell them this is absurd, let's get rid of this, and do it quickly because we need our medicine. So there was a huge propaganda campaign that started in 1937. We think that William Randolph Hearst was behind it because he owned a lumber company that was supplying his newspapers with paper, and hemp was a competing product. So for those of you who don't know, our Declaration of Independence is written on hemp paper. So it used to be a favorite of the founding fathers. It was grown everywhere. It was made into building materials and rope and clothing, fabrics, and so on. And it's beginning to make a comeback in that regard. The hemp that's grown for those purposes has no psychoactive component to it. So it's hard to understand why they would have outlawed it, except that it looks a lot like the other stuff. So anyway, they told the public that it made people crazy. It was mostly used in minority communities at that time. The Mexicans brought it in from Mexico, and the African Americans found it to be helpful when they had to do their toughest work in the fields and so on. And so it got a reputation for being the drug of choice of immigrants and minorities. And so the majority of people were ready to hear this lie, and we bought into it. And then it was criminalized more and more until finally in 1996, the state of California started stepping down the criminal to a civil offense, the fine no more than $100 for possession of an ounce, and which is a fair amount. I mean, it's a good amount of weed, we can call it, pot, whatever you like to call it. And the real irony of all of this is that it's probably safer than aspirin. Nobody has ever died. There has never been a reported case of death from any amount of marijuana because it'll put you to sleep first. And the reason nobody dies is because there are no receptors on the brainstem itself. Your brainstem is what keeps you breathing when you're asleep. It's what keeps you breathing under all circumstances. But when you overdose on an opioid, for example, there are receptors on the brainstem for those, and that's why people fall asleep, forget to breathe, and die. So that's the difference here. This is a psychoactive if it has THC, but it is not a lethal or a dangerous drug. So it's been in use as a medicine probably more than 15,000 years. They found it in a tomb with a princess in China, and that was found to be about 10 or 15,000 years old.
Marijuana History 101, or should I say extremely brief Marijuana History 101. It's big, complicated, and we'll only be able to scratch the surface, so let's get started. The first thing that strikes one as odd when looking at the history of marijuana, which is also known as cannabis, is how very much legal it once was. In fact, it wasn't only legal, it just happened to be one of the largest agricultural crops in the world, including the United States. You see, cannabis can also be hemp. And just what is hemp? Well, it's by and large the most robust, durable, natural soft fiber on the face of this planet. Up until 1883, and for thousands of years before, cannabis hemp was the largest agricultural crop in the world. It had thousands of uses and products. The majority of fabric, lighting oil, medicines, paper, and fiber came from hemp. The first marijuana law to exist in the United States was a law ordering farmers to grow hemp. Benjamin Franklin used it to start one of America's first paper mills. The first 2 copies of the Declaration of Independence were written on cannabis hemp paper. Up until the 1800s, most of the textiles in the United States were made with hemp. 50% of medicine marketed in the last half of the 19th century was made from cannabis. Even Queen Victoria used the resin extracts from cannabis to alleviate her menstrual cramps. But the funny thing about industrial hemp was you couldn't get high from it. Yet, it was lumped in with the following, which also made little sense. Reefer madness. In the early 20th century, yellow journalism had surfaced. Articles depicted blacks and Mexicans as frenzied beasts who would smoke marijuana, play devil's music, and heap disrespect and viciousness on the readership, a majority of which happened to be white. Some offenses included looking at a white woman twice, laughing at a white person, or even stepping on white men's shadows. And this ended up leading to a law in the form of a tax stamp. A tax stamp that would not only include marijuana, but also hemp and cannabis medicines. It's speculated that hemp's potential for an abundance of new products was going to be in direct competition with other sources. And this, added to the reefer madness, led to the eventual downfall of all forms of cannabis. Popular Mechanics magazine had actually prepared an article entitled New Billion-Dollar Crop. Hemp was touted as being able to produce more than 5,000 textile products from its thread-like fiber and more than 25,000 products from its cellulose, ranging from dynamite to cellophane. Its superiority as a source for paper was also becoming known, especially with the development of hemp processing equipment. Now, the new Marijuana Tax Act was all fine and dandy, except for one thing. If you wanted to grow hemp, you needed to buy a stamp, but they weren't giving any out to anybody. And so, in effect, all forms of cannabis became illegal. Things pretty much stayed that way until World War II, when the government decided that hemp once again was a good thing and produced a video, Hemp for Victory. But by the time the war was over, hemp again became bad. And in 1948, when the marijuana law once again came into question, Congress recognized that marijuana was made illegal for the wrong reason. It didn't make people violent at all. It made them pacifists. The communists would use it to weaken America's will to fight. Congress now voted to keep marijuana illegal for the exact opposite reason they had outlawed it in the first place. And all through the years, report after report, commissioned by everybody, from the mayor of New York to the president of the United States, has come back with the view that marijuana should have no criminal penalty attached to it. Yet, marijuana remains as illegal today as it did nearly 70 years ago.
So here in Florida, in 2014, a law was passed called the Compassionate Use Act. That was probably due to Sanjay Gupta's CNN specials on marijuana, which talked a lot about children with seizure disorders and how helpful it is for them and how difficult it is for them to get a hold of it. So we're 20 years behind California and probably 14 years behind Colorado, but we did pass that act so that it became legal for a qualified physician, i.e. someone who's taken an online course for 8 hours and paid the $1,000 to be certified, which we have to do every 2 years. So the state is making money all around. We can now prescribe CBD, which I'll explain to you what that is, for seizure disorders, muscle spasms, and cancer, the side effects of chemotherapy. THC is the component that makes you high. We're only allowed under that law to prescribe THC-containing product for people who are not expected to live a year. So you have to be terminally ill if you want to get high. So in Florida, we just passed Amendment 2, I'm sure you're aware, with a 71% majority, which is the largest yes vote ever in history, to expand those indications and to allow THC-containing product to be ordered for many, many other indications. So we have joined 28 other states. So more than half of the states are legalizing medical marijuana, and about 6 or 7 of them have now legalized recreational marijuana. So the tide is turning, the federal government has not gotten the message, and we need to make sure that the pharmaceutical industry stays out of this whole process. So let's go to the next. Okay, so the green states are the ones that have legalized recreational, and the gray states are the ones that have medical marijuana. So we can see that it's mostly the South and the deep Midwest, if you will, that are lagging behind, but not for long, I suspect, because they're all looking at how much money they're pulling in taxes. And if my memory serves, last year Colorado made about $400 million in tax revenue. And that is quite attractive to states where revenue has been going down with loss of jobs. And this also creates a lot of jobs. So I think, and I'm hoping that our president is going to overrule his attorney general in letting this continue and even encouraging it to happen. Go ahead. Okay, so here are the indications that were named in Amendment 2. So we're looking at a lot of neurologic disorders, particularly the neurodegenerative diseases that we have very little to offer these people in conventional medicine. I don't consider cannabis conventional medicine yet, because most of the doctors are very, very resistant to the whole idea. They're not innovators. We can talk about that later, but here are the indications that were named. And then it also said in the amendment that a qualified physician can prescribe for any condition of similar severity. Whether that's going to make it into the rules, we don't know. So the legislature right now has until July to come up with the rule framework for how this is actually going to happen. And then they have until September to implement the rules. So the first thing they've rolled out now is the registry card. So you can't get your medicine until you are registered. So you have to see the doctor first, then you have to fill out a questionnaire and send them money and send them, I think it's $75 for a card, and send them a photograph, a little 2x2 passport style photograph. And then you get your ID card and then you're kosher. Okay, so next. Okay, so top 10 are the ones that you saw. Actually, there are so many other indications for the use of cannabis products that this is just skimming the surface. The problem is we don't have the research because we've been forbidden to do research. So most of the research is coming out of Israel at this time. Dr. Raphael Meshulam has been studying cannabis since 1962, and he's the one that found the endocannabinoid system, which is in our brains and in our nervous system and in our immune system. And in fact, he received money from the American National Institutes of Health to do a lot of this research. And the NIH also holds patents for certain cannabinoid derivatives, certain processes and whatnot. So if it has no medicinal value, why is the government holding patents on products that will come from this research? Good question, right? Okay, next. Okay, another movie.
Hi, Larry. How are you?
Come in, come in.
Good to see you. How you feeling?
It's been a bit of a rough week.
Really? And the best way to take it is put it under your tongue and rub it in your cheek. Don't do too much. You're going to be asleep all afternoon. You know what you should do?
No.
Don't try to communicate. Just relax. See what happens.
We know from animal experiments that the endogenous cannabinoid system is very important in regulating motor activity, that very type of activity that is impaired in Parkinson's disease. From animal experiments, we also know that boosting certain branches of the endocannabinoid system is helpful in relieving symptoms of Parkinson's. Finally, from anecdotal information, we know that certain patients who smoke marijuana experience relief of their symptoms.
I think you're calmed down.
So quickly.
Isn't that amazing?
He used just a single drop, and his hands afterwards were rock steady, and the dyskinesia left.
The voice is coming back.
It works most of the time.
In fact, it's... Did you guys eat lunch?
Are you hungry now?
Funny I am. Actually,
A person like me could really use marijuana. It makes me pretty angry that I can't get it in my home state.
The number one frustration that I have is knowing that there is this untapped potential that comes from what marijuana is teaching us to generate new medicines, and being stuck because of financial issues or political issues. That is extremely frustrating.
We now know that medical marijuana controls dyskinesia, and yet it's not available to us.
So these are some of the actions that cannabis products do. So antispastic, you just saw. Analgesic means pain relief. Antiemetic means it's good for nausea and vomiting. Neuroprotective, you can see. Anti-inflammatory, and it has effects on certain psychiatric diseases like anxiety and depression, bipolar disorder, and so on. So we have the two main strains are sativa and indica, and cannabis is the family name. So sativa is really the one that produces THC, the psychoactive component, the one that makes you high. And the hybrid actually produces more of a body effect, which is relaxation, it's anti-anxiety. It can also lock you into the couch, as they say, without altering your sensation or your perception. But it is in use now and is extremely effective for many conditions just by itself. The sativa component has a lot of THC, and so what some of the medicinal products do is they combine THC and CBD in certain ratios for certain disorders. And as I said, we are way behind California and Colorado. So the doctors in Florida are learning as we speak. And it turns out that as in holistic medicine, integrative medicine that I do, it's a very individual thing. So we like to start low, go slow, and work our way up to a dose that works for the particular individual with a product that's either combined or just straight one or the other. So it's working with your doctor, letting your doctor know if it's good for you, if it's too much, if it's too little, or what is actually happening. And then the hybrid strains, they've been genetically putting together for many years and creating these different strains for different purposes. It also happens that marijuana produces certain chemicals called terpenes. And the terpenes are what gives each hybrid its particular smell. And it also functions as an enhancer of the effect. So some of these terpenes can make you more alert. Some of them can make you more drowsy. Some of them can work better for pain and so on. So even the smell can tell you something about it. We are not in Florida permitted to use the bud as it grows. We can only use the product as it's been extracted and pharmaceuticalized, if you will. Go ahead. Okay, and these are three of the components. We've talked a little about THC. The receptors are mostly in the brain for the THC, and the other receptors are on the peripheral nerves and in the immune system. CBD works mostly on the periphery and with the immune system. And I'm not sure why CBN, cannabinol, was included in this slide, because it's not available and it doesn't have much research at all. So it is very sedating, and that may be useful at some point for some people. So here are your lock and key product and receptor. What's so interesting is that this plant is the only plant that works with this newly found system in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system, which means we produce cannabinoids in our own bodies. And that's pretty amazing, that the plant has paralleled us throughout evolution and has come up with things that work with the system we just discovered. So the endocannabinoids are called, the one that's more psychoactive, that works on the CB1 receptors, is called anandamide, which is from the Sanskrit word for bliss. So I think it was nicely named by Dr. Meshulam. The other one is AG2, and that one works more on the periphery and is non-psychoactive. So then we have various ways of getting the product into our bodies. We don't have all of these available in Florida. As I said, we can't get bud. We're not allowed to smoke unless it's a vape pen. So vaping is one way of doing that. And what is vaping? It's a little gizmo that looks like a pen, and it has a cartridge inside it with the extracted oil that has the actual medicine in it. So whether it's THC with CBD or CBD alone or THC alone, it comes in a cartridge. You set it into this little pen and you can draw in vapors from it. Now what it does is it raises the temperature of the oil, not enough to combust the oil, so you're not smoking the oil, but it makes the active ingredient evaporate. So that's the only thing that's going into your lungs. So you're not getting the carcinogenic products of combustion that you would be getting if you were smoking a joint, for example. So that's the smoking aspect of it. There are drops that you can put under your tongue, which act fairly rapidly. They go quickly to the brain. There are capsules or edibles. We don't have many edibles yet, but the capsules can be swallowed, and those usually take 1 to 2 hours to work, but they work for longer periods of time. So for some people, for example, people in pain, I would want them to start with vaping or with a sublingual, because that comes on within maybe 10 minutes and lasts for 1 or 2 hours, during which time the ingested product can start working and keep you going for longer. So again, it's a customized medicine, if you will. Capsule sprays, they have oil extracts, and you can now buy CBD in every state in the Union. Hemp products are legal now. So don't feel bad. If you want to try it, go to your local health food store and see what they've got. It is not the pharmaceutical grade. It is not tested and retested 100 times to know exactly what's in it and what is not in it. So you're taking a bit of a chance. But we all know we've got a 90-day wait period, and some people can't wait that long, so it's available. And that's my favorite quote from my toxicology textbook. I looked it up many years ago, and I could not find another drug or chemical in that book this big that could say that. There isn't anything. Okay.
Every year, prescription medicines kill over 100,000 people.
The pharmaceutical industry has been excellent at convincing the public that they need their potions. If you watch any kind of commercial for drugs, they're always using the third person. For example, where does a headache come from? It comes from out there somewhere.
Don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle.
How many people in this country alone are addicted to antidepressants? How many people who are on antidepressants really have imbalances, and how many of them just got off of a bad relationship and they're depressed?
It seems to be acceptable to give people something as long as you're wearing a white smock or you've given them a legal prescription. It doesn't matter how deadly the particular drug might be in terms of side effects.
What we call modern medicine is actually alternative medicine because it's highly experimental, it's often dangerous, often toxic, and it kills a lot of people.
To me, it's crazy. There's a lot of stuff out there that'll affect you in different ways.
Look at aspirin, heroin, both invented by Bayer.
I thought heroin came from opium seeds. And
Just natural effect of opium, you keep making it more and more concentrated? No, you have to add certain chemicals to it and tweak it a certain way. It doesn't just come from opium itself.
What was heroin made for?
As a cure for morphine addiction and coughs. Heroin, the sedative for coughs.
Pseudoephedrine. That's the main ingredient in methamphetamine, is to cure the cough, the cold. If you get a cold, oh, I think I'll do some meth. When you look at it from a large perspective, like, what's weed?
Even Francis Young, the DEA's own judge, who took medical testimony for over 2 weeks, made this statement. Marijuana, in its natural form, is one of the safest, therapeutically active substances known to man. Yet, despite this, and the ever-mounting number of real-world patient success stories, cannabis remains listed as a Schedule I narcotic. Under that category, marijuana is classified as having no known medical value.
Okay, so how do we do this now? You make an appointment, you go and see the doctor who's gone through the qualifying process, you get your name entered in the registry, and then 90 days later, you can get your order for your prescription. So when I see a patient, I like to put them on some sort of a holistic program for getting well. I don't believe in sweeping it under the drug medicine, even if that drug is cannabis. I like to tell people what they can do for themselves that will help them. So I'm going to tell all of you now, and particularly those of you with chronic pain, whether it's arthritis or old injuries or whatever, try a 2-week experiment. Stop eating dairy, wheat, and eggs. Those are the big 3 allergy foods. So dairy, cow's milk, anything made from cow's milk. There are many good substitutes out there now, coconut milk and almond milk and hemp milk for that matter. And wheat for the gluten. Gluten-free substitutes are available, but they're also high in carbs, so I don't encourage a whole lot of that. But if you're going to eat pasta, eat rice pasta instead of the wheat pasta. So you can find substitutes, or even better, spaghetti squash, and put your spaghetti sauce on top of that. Way lower calories, just as delicious, and much better for you. So that's your tip for the day. While you're waiting, do this for yourselves, and many of you will see a change for the better. So then once you've gotten your prescription, then you need to start working with your doctor, who can change your prescription if you need more, or add the THC if you need that, at least when the rules come out. We're all kind of holding our breath until that happens. But that's coming up fast. So here we are, the end of March. It's going to be July before we know it. It's going to be Christmas before we know it. So hopefully you're getting ready for Christmas because it's on its way. And you need to get your ID card or the dispensary won't talk to you. And the dispensary looks on the registry online to see that the doctor has made a recommendation. What is the dosage? What is the frequency? And they will actually deliver product all over the state. They can't mail it, and they want to be sure that it gets where it's going. So as of now, the 3 dispensaries that I know are up and running are all delivering direct to the patient. Interesting. So what else do we have here? That's it? Okay, so put up the next slide. And so now is the time for your good questions. Okay, we're going to bring a microphone over to you, if you don't mind.
Hi. What happens during the 90-day waiting period, that 90 days from the time you apply to you get the card? What are they doing?
What are they doing? They're torturing us. They're putting us on hold. I have no idea what the rationale for that was.
Was that in the original law?
That was in the 2014 law, yes. I don't know. I know that there are, as far as I can tell, 3 big lobbies that are trying to hold this back. Number one, of course, the pharmaceutical industry, because many people spontaneously go off their meds when they start this. They don't need them anymore. The second one is the alcohol lobby. And the third one is the drug dealers, the cartels. So all 3 have huge amounts of money to spend on, lobbying and whatnot. And they have kept this from becoming, easily available. So that's my theory. I don't have any proof.
I just had a question because I'm a little bit confused because I had already spoken to one of the competitors of the companies that's offering this. And under my understanding, we could already go through all this process and get it. Okay, now when you read to an article recently that was in the Tampa Times, it sort of, just talks more about the law and when it's going to be available. And if you just read that article, anybody who could read it would say, oh, I just cannot do this until everything's approved. Whereas right now, if you are with a doctor that has taken the course, I just wanted to make sure has taken the course, has recommended you, you go on the list. Once you have your ID card, and once all that is approved, right now you can get it in those forms that are legal in Florida. Am I correct?
You are correct. You are correct. It's, but the indications are narrow. The reasons why I can prescribe it are just very few right now. Right. Now, they did say that the amendment went into effect on January 3rd. But what does that really mean? I've spoken to lawyers about that, and they've advised me that Don't start prescribing for other indications until they come through with the new rules. So we are prescribing under the old law.
Exactly. So right now it would be, you would probably be prescribed if you were under those diseases that originally were.
Muscle spasms, seizure disorder, cancer.
But right now it's broader, like the first one, like MS and others.
Yes, and I can do that with, MS, you can call that muscle spasms. Parkinson's, you can call that muscle spasm. So many of these disorders are already, doable under the old law, but we're waiting to see exactly what they're going to say before we really start pushing the broader indications.
My question is very, very simple. Compared to the so-called street price of marijuana, which we all know is not cheap, what would the legal laboratory marijuana, would it be equatable? Would it be more? Would it be less? Is it expensive when you buy it in a lab?
It is expensive, I must say, but if it gets you off 3 or 4 other drugs, it's going to save you money. So yes, and it's not covered by insurance, so it's all out-of-pocket expense.
Is it sold by the gram, by the ounce? How is it sold?
It is sold by the milligrams.
Which is very tiny.
Well, it's what will be your dose, and that will be determined by the doctor in concert with you.
Just like a pill prescription or any kind of
Just like any other prescription, you have to start somewhere and then work your way to a therapeutic dose.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't see anything about, say, autoimmune diseases or like RA or lupus. What about that?
Well, we haven't seen it in the research yet. In my experience as an integrative doctor, autoimmune disorders go along with food allergies. It goes along with poor gut integrity. So if you work with a practitioner who can help you identify your food problems and roll back your digestive issues, your autoimmune problems will get much, much better. Where is the use of cannabis? I would say probably in pain relief in that case.
But what I'm really getting at is, will it be recognized legally? I mean, I do have these issues personally, so I have severe pain and I have rheumatoid arthritis and all that. Will it be recognized? It seems like it's very restrictive from what they only recognize now.
Some of those, I mean, if they have to include pain, I would include pain as an indication. So if the physician is permitted to decide for the patient, which is what we do all the time with every drug that we prescribe, then yes, it will be included.
So at the very least, they give you that latitude as a physician to decide.
The amendment gave it to us. The last time I looked at what's going on in the legislature, they were talking about giving that leeway to the Florida Department of Health and not to the individual doctors. So this is very worrisome.
Are you writing the recommendations under the old law, the Charlotte's Web, or Amendment 2?
I am at present because I don't have the rules yet, but I'm trying to sneak people in under what's already existing. And certainly I'm seeing people now with the 90-day wait period who will qualify under the new rules. So we're trying. We're doing the best we can.
I have a clinical question, but I think you might have already answered it, so I apologize if it's a duplication. But the seizure disorder under the old law, if I'm not mistaken, was very, very narrow and specific, and maybe only dealt with children, I think.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
No,
I have a
it
broad
can be anyone.
spectrum seizure disorder since my brain surgery, and so will I be one of the candidates that could potentially be approved, or is it still, you had said something about writing under the old law. So that's why I was wondering.
You qualify under the 2014 law, under the old law. Seizure disorder is seizure disorder.
It was broad.
Well, that was one of the 3 indications. in the 2014 law. So you already have a diagnosis that is covered.
One thing I didn't notice that was not included was pain management, and I think it's huge. Where is pain management fit on the scheme of this?
Well, let me tell you, currently the state of pain management in conventional medicine is pretty grim because all they have to offer is opioids. Vicodin, hydrocodone, Tylenol with codeine, all that stuff. And Percocets, that starts people on an addictive path. And they need more and more because they become habituated. So they wind up, and then the doctors now are afraid to prescribe it because they're being so closely watched. And they have to go through, the pain management docs also have to register all their patients. So it's heavily regulated. In the states that have legalized medical marijuana, the death rate from overdose, opioid overdose, has gone down 20%. That's a lot. So that is definitely one of the strongest indicators that we can prescribe for.
Now, how does a person who their history is pain management, opioid use, but clean, do you think that that's a non-starter for them? What they've used, what they've done before. Some people are concerned about being, I guess, addictive personalities, and they might have fallen into that basket. I'm just wondering how that would be viewed.
Well, we are looking at CBD and THC as treatments for addictions. They are wonderful substitutes for far more dangerous drugs.
Now you said, let's say the time clock starts at 90 days for the card. Do you think, do you feel that maybe within the 90 days or sometime shortly after that, there'll be an expansion of the...
Yes, I think that by September we'll know the rules. And then we can start fighting for better rules.
Choose your battles.
Exactly. But if you tell your doctor, you go and see a doctor, tell them that you get muscle spasms too.
Well, our doctor is also we're told that she wants to be involved with this also.
Good, okay. So you're all set.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your attention. I'll be here to answer some questions.